Good day, Dr. Randy. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. We're in the midsummer here and the weather is doing well.
That's
And
because we're in Southern California. It's not good for everybody, unfortunately.
well, not only in Southern California, but near the ocean. So, which is
Absolutely. So always so beautiful. I
yeah,
never stop appreciating just looking at the majesty of it. I imagine people feel that way about mountains too.
yeah. Today's article you previously said when promises becomes lies has been a article that you published in Psychology Today
Yes.
and has garnered a lot of hits. So we're gonna link it down as well. But this is going to be a good topic because you're going to be able to talk about it live here on our podcast. So let me know what this article is about.
Well, it's very, very important, obviously, that when people have been together for a while, they have to trust each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's everything in a relationship. And trust it means that people keep their promises or they renegotiate. Trust means you have the same ethical and moral values. Trust means that you can trust the person you love to be exactly the way away from you as they are with you, because they hold that trust sacred and they don't betray each other. So, what I'm going to talk about today is a little bit unusual because trust is broken in a very sad kind of way and for very sad kinds of reasons. I've often said that if you're ever married to somebody who constantly promises you things but doesn't come through, you'll get very, very crazy because you have to pay attention to what they do, not what they wish, intend, or promise you, because you're going to be consistently disappointed. And people don't want to look at what people do. They want to hope they hear the promises. And so they hold on too long until finally the trust is broken. So what I'm going to talk about today is how that process occurs and how it can be changed in hopes that people don't get caught up in this and lose the basic foundation of trust, which is that people tell you who they are, what they do, what they will do, what they'll come through with, and they don't break those promises.
Mm-hmm.
They keep up. So kind of let's talk about it a little bit. First of all, most promises that don't come through are not meant to hurt. People do it, they don't do it out of evil or the desire to make somebody crazy. They do it for lots of other reasons, which I will explain, but they're not meant to hurt. If they do happen in a quality relationship, somebody promises something and forgets, and it's important, then people they redefine clarity of definitions. They say to people, what did you really mean? Maybe I didn't do it right. I'm really sorry that I did that to you. We'll do better in the future. Let's reappraise the whole situation. In other words, there's semblance if something goes wrong for the relationship to be reevaluated by both people. It's an opportunity for reevaluation, and all relationships have to be reevaluated from time to time. You just can't go on what's been, because you have experiences and memories and things happen in relationships that you have to sort of reintegrate them into what the relationship is about. So if you make a mistake or something like that, it's an opportunity for the couple to then say, well, should we look at all of our relationships? Should we look at other places we're not coming through for each other, and maybe we just pretended it didn't happen and pushed it away? But it's an opportunity to do that, because they know that that always the cover up to a crime is worse than a crime in most cases. So people don't want to share that, then and it happens, then people are doubly distressed by it. So is this opportunity to do that? What happens if a couple does the right thing? They listen to each other, they re-clarify, redefine, but the behaviors keep happening anyway. That's when we're getting in trouble, because if you promise something to somebody over and over and you don't come through,
Mm-hmm.
over time, what can they do? They have to start eroding away at the trust they feel that they can count on you for anything. Even if it's a child promising to do homework and doesn't do it, promises and doesn't do it, over time, you can't believe their promise as much as they feel very good about promising. They mean to do it, but you can't trust it because the behavior is different from what they've said.
Mm-hmm.
They happen everywhere in a relationship. So what happens when the behaviors continue anyway? Well, it's harder and harder to accept excuses. People less and less believe. I don't want to hear that again. That erosion of trust begins slowly, but it's like, why are you promising me not coming through if the behavior is continuing after we promised we would, in fact, reevaluate this and do it differently, but you're doing the same kinds of behaviors. So the apologies become hollow. They become thin. The people don't want to believe them anymore, even while they may still want to believe them. If that partner's not open to evaluating that relationship, we're kind of at a standstill. Because ultimately, as I said earlier, you have to believe what people do, not what they wish, intend, or promise, because what you do is who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, but what you do over time is what people will expect you to become. So you can't get away saying, oh no, I'm not that person. You are what you do. That is who you are in this world. And that's what people come to depend on and rely on. Who you are, what you do, not what you say. So let's look at why people continue to make promises they can't keep. Because mostly, and I really can tell you this from my heart, their motivation is innocent. They don't mean to. So let's take a look at what happens. They don't make clear agreements. They will say, yes, yes, of course, and the person will talk, but they don't say, what do you exactly mean? What do you really want me to do? Make it clearer to me what you expect. If you want me to pick you up at 6 o'clock, is it 5:45 or 6:15? Because often I'm waiting for you and you're late. So they begin to make much cleaner and clearer agreements to make sure that when one person says is what the other person heard. Lots of misunderstanding in text that way. Terrible misunderstanding. But then people use the text. See, you said this. And the person says, oh, I forgot, but I said something else later. So, texts have created a lot more of these misunderstandings. Maybe people don't pay attention to past patterns. Maybe they used to be one way and now they're another way, and they haven't brought that up to date, or they haven't recommitted to each other. Your behavior has changed. You used to be always on time, and now you are rarely on time. Why have things changed? So sometimes when a person has always been reliable, but then starts to be less reliable, it takes much longer for the other person to realize that they're not keeping their agreements because their behavior has changed. And that leads to all kinds of suspicions. Should I trust you? Should I not trust you? I used to be able to call you and you would answer right away, and now you don't text me right back, or you don't answer me. What's going on? And it may be just that the person has changed priorities. They're working harder. They're expected to show up other places that they maybe didn't have to before. People change in priority for each other. And so maybe somebody doesn't quite do what they've done in the past, but it's happened over a period of time. So that person has to make clear agreements, has to get rid of misunderstandings, paying attention to past patterns that I talked about, not to promise without understanding the real expectation. You say, oh yeah, I'll do that. I'll pick up the cleaning or something like that. Well, I needed it for today, but you didn't tell me that. So people have to sort of sharpen their focus together when this starts to happen, so they don't begin that erosion of trust I talked about. Another reason is that there are a number of reasons why, but there are people who are very passive aggressive, which might be called passive rebellious, which might be called passive not listening. But people who are passive aggressive can't stand disharmony. So they don't think about whether they can really do what that person wants or not. But in the moment, they say, of course, of course, of course. They'll agree to something that they maybe know in the back of their head is unlikely to happen, but they'll agree to it anyway in the moment because they want to make the other person happy. They may even know they can't come through, but they just don't want to face that disharmony, that other person's disappointment. And then when they don't do it, they want their good intent to be forgiven. Well, I meant to, of course I wanted to, but these things came up, whatever it is. But if a person agrees in the moment but doesn't come through, you will get that person's partner will become very crazy, very, very unstable, very nagging, pushing. Why do you betraying me? It begins a negative spiral that's really not very good at all. Maybe that passive aggressive person doesn't want to look at what their real priorities are. Maybe they don't really want to please the person that much, but they're afraid to say that or afraid to even look at that in themselves. But the problem is that they agree and then they don't come through. And the other person becomes more and more and more distressed. Another reason would be that some people literally are self-delusional. They really do believe that they can do anything. that whatever their partner wants of them, they'll somehow manage to do it. They don't look at their own limitations. They take on too much. They can't work on everything they promise. It's impossible.
Mhm.
Maybe they feel that since they give so much in other areas, that these areas that they lapse should be kind of acceptable. Maybe if they just try hard enough, they can supply anything they're asked to do. So they're delusional. They have not really looked at how they actually behave in some ways, because they want to be better than they are. And I don't mean better as a judgment. They want to fulfill their partner in any way they can, but they can't. It's really literally not possible for them to do that. And I will see this again using the example of children. When parents have very, very high expectations and a child can't meet those expectations, they will keep trying harder and harder and harder and feeling more and more guilty and badly about themselves, because they're not looking at the fact that they can't, not that they won't or don't want to.
Mhm.
So the fourth would be this inability for self-care, and this is really important. People who promise and don't come through don't take into account what they need, what they want, or what they need and want from their partner. Their fear of being disliked or rejected if they can't measure up in some way to what that other partner wants. They don't even ask the partner to change who they are. They put all the onus on themselves to be able to care for somebody, and they can't take care of themselves until everybody else is satisfied and happy, because of this inability to set boundaries. They can't differentiate between selfish and self-care, or selfish and self-serving. The idea that they would want something that would make their partner unhappy, or want something that's more important to them than is to their partner, they cannot even accept that idea or that thought. So they put people first even when they should not. They get exhausted, and very often, by the way, they'll expect their partner to see that they're giving too much, and their partner to say to them, "You're giving too much, you need to stop." Well, if the partner doesn't know that they're in conflict, that partner is not likely to say that to them. So they keep giving, and unfortunately, this often leads to martyrdom, and it's sort of an identity that I'm the person that has to give and give and give, and nobody else cares about me. But in reality, their expectations of self in a relationship are enormously out of proportion. So they can't say to their partner. Now, very often when a person starts in a relationship like this and seems happy and able to give everything to the other partner, they feel that self-centeredness in the other partner. And so it becomes even more difficult later on for them to say, "But what about me? What about me? What about me? I can't please you. I need time for myself. I need time to heal. I need time to go to the gym." They can't even say that anymore, because they've forgotten that they don't know how to take care of themselves, and their partners have no idea that they are that martyr. Now, that will often come out in a fight. "What about me? Does anybody care about me?" And the partner will say, "Well, why didn't you tell me what you needed? I didn't even know you needed something different," because they don't tell them. Okay, another is that there are people that they have a very hard time failing. This kind of intertwines with some of the other things that are saying, but usually coming from childhood, that they never, ever, 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 ever felt good enough for anybody. They don't want to look at their patterns because it makes them feel like they're failing. They'd rather excuse them or pretend they didn't happen, or deviate from the subject, because the idea that they promised something and didn't come through is unbearable to them, because somehow they should have. If they made a promise, they should have kept it. So they don't take in consideration that maybe some other things might come up that they couldn't predict. They don't give themselves what I would say sort of, they don't pad things. I have 3 things to do this afternoon, but I can get them all done, rather than saying, I might be later than you think. I'll be done before 8, but they don't say I'll be there at 7 and then show up at 8. They pad it because they're taking consideration that maybe they can't do those things. So it's separate from self-care. It's predicting self better, so that very, very often. I mean, I've had people who want to get to something on time, and people who like to get to something at the last minute. They go nuts with each other. They usually should take separate cars. It just never works. But the reality is that if a person can look at themselves and say, "Well, maybe I'm not enough some of the time," And maybe that's okay. You know, I can't challenge this other person because I'm afraid they'll make me feel even more selfish. But what if it's not selfishness? What if you are actually just looking at the fact where you can't? And if you can look at where you can't, then where you can is going to be more believed. So sometimes those people have to get kind of into therapy and go into why can't I accept failure? You know, why can't failure is according to the other person's desires and wants. Why am I letting that other person define whether I'm a success or not? That usually takes a little deeper reflection, you know, in a therapeutic involvement, but it's very, very healable. You know, when a person says to me, I feel so selfish, they probably are not selfish, because truly selfish people don't think they're selfish.
Mm.
Okay, so let's move on a little bit. When people, this often happens when a person's very charming or a child's very charming. It's when they have to prove that what they did was acceptable under the circumstances. Now that happens, of course, if it's happened 10 times, that may be okay, but by the hundredth time, but these people are unbelievable in coming up with creative reasons for doing this. I have a personal story to share that I hope other people will enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
My father had a barbershop to the movie stars in Beverly Hills, and we only had one car.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother didn't like to get off the phone with her family. So every single night she was at least 5 or 10 minutes late to pick him up. And I'd hear the same argument on the way home. I stand on my feet all day long. The least you could do would be there on time. And I couldn't understand why she was always 15 minutes late. Till much better later, and by the way, not 20 and not 10, exactly 15. So later on in my life, when I was studying psychology and learning about people's behaviors,
Mm-hmm.
I realized that my father was a very critical person when he came home. He would always find fault. He didn't like the food, or things weren't arranged, or things weren't okay, or just he was tired from the day and feeling critical and grumpy. So what my mother did, she learned unconsciously how to pull his criticism in the car. So by the time he got home, he was fine. And I thought that was really clever of her, except she didn't know what she was doing. But she had a different excuse every single night. It was never the same excuse. You know, the cleaning lady didn't leave till late, or the people didn't arrive, or I was on the phone talking. It was hysterical and absolutely brilliant. But she was very good at it. Well, very charismatic people. My mom was sort of a sweetheart, but charismatic people can come up with a book of excuses, none of which they have ever used before. And so if they're charming and interesting and funny, then people will put up with it for a while until they finally say, I don't care what the excuses are anymore. I'm not interesting. They're not, I don't care. What you do is what you do. And don't bother me with why you did it anymore. I'm done, no matter how interesting it may be.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go back and recap. If excuses are only occasional and not consistent, it's easier for the other person to accept them. Obviously, you can get over that. You can forgive people. But over time, a partner that doesn't come through all the time will no longer be believed. That's when excuses become lies. You might as well say to somebody, I'm not telling you the truth. I'm not going to do what you asked me to do. It's a lie. And lies are much harder to forgive because the agreements mean nothing and the trust is eroded. So, what can an excuse maker do to make their partner regain trust in them if they really want to do that? Number one, always admit your mistakes up front. I didn't tell you the truth. I absolutely did what you said. There was no excuse for it. I'm deeply sorry. It's my fault, not yours. I'm going to really work on doing better. So just be accountable. Just be accountable. Don't try to put the responsibility on your partner to forgive you when the reality is that you shouldn't be asking for forgiveness. The second thing, you want to genuinely apologize. My behavior is driving you crazy. I am truly sorry. It's not intentional. I don't mean to do it, but I can see that it's driving you crazy. So I'm accountable. I'm really sorry. The third, let's go over all the misunderstandings like we talked about a little earlier in this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Define expectations. I've talked to you about what I can and can't do. Let me tell you about my priorities and where they shift and change. Really, really opening oneself up without defensiveness, and hopefully on the other end of a partner who is very eager to help them change this behavior. I make somebody else important without asking you. I make other things important without asking you. I prioritize without your permission and support. I'm not going to do that again because I know it makes you feel terrible. Let me tell you when I need to put myself first, and I'm hoping you'll support me in that, because I don't always want to do whatever you want to do. I sometimes want to do what I want to do instead. Can I tell you what those things are? Can I engage you in working with me to help me take better care of myself? Just talking it through. Ask your partner, please help me. Please help me. And the most important thing as you develop these things is just stop promising what you know you will not come through with, no matter what the consequences are, no matter how much you want to make somebody happy. When you know that it's highly likely you are not going to be able to come through, don't promise. Just don't promise. Tell the truth. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm doing. These are the probabilities. And these are the things that are not likely to happen. Be honest with yourself, honest with your partner, and hopefully your partner will help you change that behavior. So interesting, yes?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a lie in every relationship. Or as a human being, we're never, perfect, of course.
Absolutely. And if
And
you can catch this kind of behavior early on, it's so much better. It's so much better because, as I said at the very beginning, trust is everything. You
yeah,
can't lie to your partner, even if you don't think you're lying.
right. Oh wow. Okay, well, let's publish this one, and then I'm gonna get the link and link it to the article from Psychology Today. And if they need to get hold of you, Dr. Randy, where can they go?
My website is Randi Gunther, one word, all lowercase, Randy with an I, at cox.net. They can actually look at the other YouTubes. They can look at, I've taken all of the 260 some articles I've written for Psychology Today over the last decade. They're all on one site, relationships.org, and they're listed by, sort of by subject, kind of fun to peruse and go through them. You're very welcome to do that.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, we'll get that over, and thank you for your time, and looking forward to be able to hear this podcast again.
Thank you so much, Anand. I'll talk to you next week.
All right.